Okay, you will see as part of your what's superimposed, this is an overview of the temporary visa system that we have, and it includes a number of different categories. A couple of them are allocated based on nationality, and it in general reflects what we perceive on a political and an economic basis, the law of supply and demand. Now, when you ask how well does the system work, the answer is in some areas pretty well, and in others, well, not so well. To further address that question, it is probably a good idea, at least in general, to ask, well, is there an unfairness or a lack of logic or a lack of common sense? The answer to that question is yes. And I'll give you an example. If you have Bill Gates, when he was still working with Microsoft, if he had called me up, and boy, I sure wish he had, because he had a lot of visa work, and he wanted to bring a person in to work temporarily at Microsoft, under this system that we have just looked at, the temporary visa system, there were probably about 4 different temporary visas we could get for the typical computer design engineer who would come to work at Microsoft. Okay, that's one scenario. Mr. Gates and similar companies like that were pretty well served by the system within reason. Supply and demand tend to fit together with the immigration system. If you compare that to an owner of a construction company who wants to bring in a carpenter or a brick mason or some kind of a manual laborer or any industry that had manual labor, for a temporary visa, if the job is year-round and does not require a college degree, that business owner cannot sponsor a worker for that kind of a visa. And the answer, why not, or the question, why not, the answer is the visa does not exist. And it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to understand or to believe that we do not have a temporary visa for workers who work in construction, landscaping, hotel, motel, service, manufacturing, to the extent we still have it, and any other kind of job that doesn't require a college degree. If the job is year-round, there is no temporary visa for that worker. And I would suggest to you that, in large part, the overwhelming part is the reason that we have so many undocumented workers. Because we've got this strong economic pull, we've got a responsive economic supply of workers. The problem that we've got, instead of our immigration system and our economic system of supply and demand working like this, it works like this. And it's worked that way for a long time. You will also see superimposed on your screen a comparison or a combination chart with temporary visas at the bottom under the line that goes all the way across the page, and the upper section, which are green cards in the employment-based system that tend to flow from the temporary to the permanent visa categories. You will see 2 empty boxes toward the right-hand bottom corner of the page, and that reflects the lack of a temporary visa for the kind of workers we're talking about. Dr. Martinez spoke earlier about the Bracero program. That is where the Bracero program would fit if it had not been terminated in 1964. Lasted for 22 years, and as he said, it was created as a result of the fact that we lost 12 million workers overnight as a result of World War II. Their absence was continued to be felt all the way up until right before the Korean War, and the Bracero program got into some trouble. But when the Korean conflict erupted, there's still that need for workers, and so it really continued on until 1964. With respect to that program, I've got what I think is a fairly revealing chart that we're also going to superimpose for you. And it reflects a study that was done by a select congressional committee back in about 1980, 81, 82, 81. And that committee collected data that reflected the number of people coming in on the southern border without permission during a period from about 1942 until about 1978. And what you will see is that it took a little while for the Bracero program to be implemented, but once it was fully implemented, and frankly it was implemented in large part because some people in the Southwest United States were prosecuted because they violated the law. And I'm talking about the owners of large agricultural institutions. Once it was fully implemented, our undocumented population or illegal entries went from over 1 million a year to 40,000 a year. We got rid of the program in '64, and you can see from the chart what happened. This shows 2 things. the law of supply and demand continues to exist independent of what we say about our immigration system. You can build all the walls you want on our southern border. People are going to come around them if they know there's work here. The second thing is people use an immigration system if it is available to them. The people that Bill Gates wants to bring in use our immigration system because there are various ways to come into the United States legally and get work permission. There is no such way, there's no line, to use the phrase we used a minute ago. There's no line for people to use if they are manual laborers filling jobs that that require a worker full-time year-round. There is no such visa for those people if the job does not require a college degree. So we're talking manual labor. Now, excuse me. That again comes back to this question of fairness, and I think whether you want to call it fairness or you want to call it common sense, our system does not work well. It is dysfunctional. If you want to put it in a faith-based context, and really this whole program was started as a result of trying to have something of a faith-based perspective when we talk about this, the system is not moral because it allows people to come in and basically treat them as disposable, treat them as invisible, treat them as folks who are not worthy of work authorization, even though their work is just as essential to the functioning of the entire economy as the computer design engineers or the scientists or the economics professors or whatever it may be, who are recognized through salary or through other kind of perks, recognized as extremely valuable to our economic system. All that is sort of to say we've got a problem with our immigration system and with many aspects to it that is in a large part reminiscent of what happened before and during the civil rights period. If you look back at that period of time, there were people who were treated as invisible, people who were treated as easily discarded, people who were not worthy of the vote, people who were not worthy of decent housing, decent wages. All of those things that happened to the black community in large part or in slightly different ways is happening to the Hispanic community. And there are other communities too that fall into this group of essential workers. But if you look at what happened back then, we as a country finally said enough is enough. And through peaceful demonstration, through pressure on Congress, through people using their First Amendment rights, there was a concerted effort to change the law, which up until then had said, that kind of discrimination and unfair treatment is just fine, to a different set of laws that said, no, it's not.